Hi, my name is Jackson Henry, and I'm here to talk with you a little bit about alternative means of proclamation. I think all too often we get stuck in a rut of reading scripture and preaching the sermon and having that be our only thought of what proclamation is in worship. And I want to challenge that just a little bit. And so to start off, I'd like to talk about some experiences I've had with preaching groups, lectionary groups that I've been a part of. All too often I find myself going to meetings and discussing the lectionary because as a worship planner I am very involved and very intimate with what the lectionary has to tell us. And yet every time I go to one of these meetings, usually somebody comes up to me and asks, well, are you preaching this weekend? Now, as a music minister, one could say that it would be easy to answer, no, I'm not preaching this weekend, but my typical answer is I preach every weekend. And proclamation to me means so much more than getting up and saying the words of Scripture. Those words tell a story. And so there are ways of interweaving different narratives as a part of our time together. Use of stories, use of books based on theological discourse, and those kinds of elements play a role in proclamation. Another thing that's central to proclamation is the use of storytelling and drama. Those things are also central to our means of proclaiming the gospel. And one that's particularly near and dear to my heart is music. Allowing the music to be able to tell that scriptural story, even though, yes, it may be a paraphrase. The role of hymns and music in worship is very central to proclamation. It's not limited to that time around the sermon. And so there are different ways that we can use that. Another way of experiencing all of these things is being able to be sure and intentionally plan silence in our worship services, to be able to fully understand that narrative and that story and the connective tissue in between, because sometimes we don't allow enough silence for people to really connect the dots as it relates to telling the story of Jesus Christ. And so I would just challenge you to think of different ways of proclaiming the gospel in your worship services. It doesn't just have to be reading from the Bible and preaching a sermon. There are other ways that you can do that, and I challenge you to do that in your own services in your churches.